Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for attending our session today. We are very excited to be talking about the power of growth data at DataCon. I'm Jennifer, CEO at Digital Magenta, and I'm going to be co-presenting today with Alice, who is our Chief Intelligence Officer. Alice and I are the founders of Digital Magenta. We are a boutique consultancy helping companies modernize their revenue operating model so they can access growth data. Growth data gives executives and teams access to powerful information and insights required to make strategic growth decisions. Just a little bit about our background. During our careers that spanned marketing, sales, analytics, and technology, we saw a lack of visibility across the entire revenue generation process. We found that teams could have a very successful strategy and optimize their own function, but if it wasn't aligned across the entire business, their metrics and activities might not be equating to revenue, and key data that is required to inform growth decisions becomes trapped inside the business. The growth functions seem to be affected the most in lacking the data they need to make informed growth decisions. And we saw decisions being made more off gut feel than hard facts. Our methodology was built to address the root cause of these data challenges. We combined our extensive experience in business strategy and data science to create the Digital Magenta growth data methodology. So what we're going to be talking about today is how data becomes trapped inside of businesses, why revenue leaks occur, what growth data is and how to access it, and we'll provide some practical strategies that you may be able to implement in your own business. So how did we get here? Over the last 10 to 15 years, things have changed drastically. As companies grow, they enter what we're calling the chasm of complexity. The chasm is made up of internal elements and external forces that come together to create business complexity. So externally, there are more and more technology options. Everything is changing at great speed. Data is exploding all around us. And the competition ends up putting a lot of pressure on us to make quick decisions. Internally, you start adding people and teams, and sometimes these teams are spanned across different locations and begin to create their own unique processes. Then you add layers of technology to become more efficient. The problem is compounded by the fact that much of the technology companies implement is specific to a function. The more technology a business function adds to optimize their individual processes, the more fractured the revenue operating model becomes. And a few things happen here. Number one, a data jungle develops that traps valuable information required to make key decisions. Inefficient operational structures emerge, and inevitably revenue begins to leak. Now, we don't only see companies leaking revenue, we also see them leaking talent because of these inefficient operational structures. But that could be a whole other topic for another day. Let's talk about what we see as the 5 common revenue leaks, and I think you'll recognize some of these. So the leaks are lack of focus, manual process, disjointed technology, siloed teams, and unusable data. And the reality is that we've never met a company that wasn't stepping over cash in one or all of these 5 ways. Some of these leaks are easy to identify, like investing in marketing efforts with no data or teams not communicating with each other. Then there's what happens below the line. And we're calling these the most terrifying aspects of business because you can't necessarily see these leaks. They include A-level opportunities that your sales organization is not following up on, or critical business intelligence being captured locally and not being shared across teams. A couple of terrifying findings we have encountered include the company that spent hundreds of thousands on online ads with no strategy, no way to measure, and ultimately no ROI. Or the company that was investing heavily in lead generation only to find out that they already had over $2 million of qualified leads stagnating in their pipeline, which was a double leak. Another company was investing heavily to generate interest only to find out that bad data was affecting their team's ability to deliver their service and close the loop on revenue generation. So to plug these leaks, you need to have a connected revenue operating model. And we're going to give you an example here of how one company did it. So this is Amazon, and in 2002, Amazon's CEO wrote this email. At the time, the company was growing so fast, its systems were having trouble supporting the growth. Amazon had made a number of acquisitions, and the systems were not integrated. They were really only loosely connected via the Amazon.com homepage. But Jeff Bezos had an answer. With this memo, he created a connected revenue operating model by simply mandating an interface method. This has worked out really well for Amazon, but obviously it's not that easy, and Amazon is a very unique case. So while it's not easy to build a connected revenue operating model out of the chasm of complexity, you need to be able to do it to access growth data. The road to gaining access to growth data does not stop with the need for a connected revenue operating model. You also need to work your way through the data jungle that I talked about in the beginning. First off, most data is dark, or in other words, unusable. The ability for a company to collect data significantly exceeds the ability to structure and analyze that data. And even some of the smaller companies that we work with have a big data problem. The reality is that 99.5% of collected data never gets used or analyzed. So while dark data is a challenge, it can also be viewed as an opportunity to gain more insights. The second type of data is a full challenge. That's what we're calling deceptive data. And unfortunately, many of the commonly used growth metrics fall into this category. They don't give a true picture of how activities and people contribute to revenue or the levers that need to be pulled to drive growth. In fact, they can have you headed in the wrong direction and wasting a tremendous amount of time and money. The most important data for us is growth data. It's a combination of data and insights that inform growth decisions. And what makes growth data truly valuable and unique is that it's mapped to critical conversion points in a company's revenue generation process. Hence the need for a clearly defined revenue operating model, a model that's connected across functions and can scale through automation. So as you can imagine, growth data is not easy to create. It has many sources. It's in online and offline formats, whether it be in your systems or people's heads and hard drives. It's also unique to each business and needs to be consolidated and accessible in a way where insights can be gleaned that can be actioned to grow results and revenue. Once growth data is identified, it needs to be captured and consolidated. Then it's validated, benchmarked, and managed via visual dashboards over time. The key benefit of growth data is highlighted in this chart. The downward line shows your ability to impact the quarter, which decreases at a significant rate. The upward curve shows how quickly opportunity is lost during the quarter. Traditional data comes too late to make adjustments and capture opportunities. And growth data, on the left there, highlights key growth levers in the revenue generation process much earlier in the quarter, therefore allowing you to make decisions that can actually impact your quarter. Now, some companies that we've encountered are even waiting longer than a quarter to analyze data and make changes. So that problem is just compounded. So if you really think about it, growth data basically creates time for us. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, how do you really access growth data? So Alice is going to take you under the hood and show you behind the scenes how this is done.
Thanks, Jennifer. So let's actually dive into the details, shall we? I'm having some, there we go. So one of the first things, that we typically do in any situation where we're really starting to connect the key data points we start with understanding system logic. And this is one of the images that Chief Martek put out. On every system, data is the core. We all know that. Data is, it is all a database in the back end. It is relational databases that's processing information and storing information. There's layers above it that everyone sees, and it's the user experience and the governance that everyone's using. And this is one of the core layers that we touch on, and we dive really deep into understanding what is this particular system logic, in the sense, what is their database architecture and how does it process data. So let's start there. And this, this is in a world where if there was just one technology, but we don't live in a world where there's one technology that solves every problem. So then we take that and we start mapping it across the business process. So in this case, this is what we've been referring to as the revenue operating model. We take the business process and we map the technologies and the functions across which data is starting to flow through. This is the starting point of creating a growth GPS. And if you really see here, and the red line to the side, a lot of businesses that we come across or we work with, everyone's looking at the rearview mirror to say, here's what was done last year and here's what we can do this year based on what we've achieved last year. So with the growth GPS, the goal is you're going to be future looking. The goal is, where are we in this revenue generation process? How does revenue flow through the business all the way into finance, marketing, sales, delivery, success, customer success teams, and finance? And in that journey, where is it at any given time? How is the revenue flowing? Where is it? How long it's going to take for the revenue to come through and materialize for that business? So this is one of the key steps in, understanding the logic is one thing, but again, revenue flows through multiple functions within an organization until it gets realized. So this is the starting point where we're taking, the data architecture and the system logic understanding, and we're mapping it to the business process. But it doesn't really stop there in this world of complexity that we live in. Let's go into the next one. So here, this is the current landscape. If we really look at just the marketing circle right here, there was 150 plus technologies like 10 years ago. Now it's 8,000 plus technologies according to Chief Martek. And that's just one part of this massive ecosystem. So there's marketing systems, there's sales technologies, so many different sales technologies, CRMs, and there's sales automation, and then there's delivery systems. Again, it is very unique to every business, and in this day and age, there's project management, there's candidate management, supply chain. So there's a ton of different delivery systems that come into play, and it flows into customer success, where people are measuring NPS scores, where you're getting the testimonials from your customers and you're processing that information, and then finance at the very end, how that money kind of like gets into the business. So understanding the system logic for one system versus actually taking that and applying it across the ecosystem. This is really where we see the need for the cross-functional view across all the ecosystems that we see here. And if I have to give my own example here, I've worked in large corporations, and in my past experience, and we've been in my early days as an analyst, we were tasked with, okay, well, what, these are the metrics that matter. Let's, support the different clients. And at the end of the day, there were CRM systems, there were marketing systems, but they weren't connected and not talking to each other. Unlike an e-commerce system where data continues to flow all the way to the end and where you can measure. This is the way that most B2B companies are operating today. They're having the siloed view into one system. And in most cases, it is the sales system that informs the C-level on where they are at any given time. What does the forecasting look like without being able to connect the dots across this landscape? So understanding the logic, mapping it across the business process, what we're doing here is this information needs to be connected, and it is possible. And the one simplest example here is the account ID. Every company has an account ID. So when they come in through the marketing door as a lead, when they become an opportunity, and when they go into the delivery systems, and when you're receiving feedback from your customers and that revenue being materialized, how many of us can say that this entire process is being mapped? And again, one of the most underlooked things is that the key critical path to growth, which is what we keep referring to as the growth data. What is that critical path? And let's actually get into the next slide here. The critical path to growth data comes from having a connected technology stack. And if we kind of move past, okay, now we've been able to connect the technology stack, are we successfully being able to connect the dots? So this is the most important step. And again, this is again a key step that we see a lot of people missing is, companies invest in a lot of technologies and then rely on their teams to actually do manual entry. And the minute that we start, relying on teams to do manual entry, we're humans, there's, errors, but at the same time, how many of us can, put our hands up and say, we've been very diligent in entering every single activity that, we've touched. So that is like the number one problem that we see. And this is why we believe creating a foolproof data. Connected systems is a great starting point, but creating a foolproof data system is again like very critical. So I did a Google search, which is the our Merriam-Webster dictionary in this day and age, and what the meaning was, it's meaning of foolproof, incapable of going wrong or being misused. How do you create that, right? So in setting those data points that people are, again, manual process is one thing, leveraging automation to create data points, but then even in those manual entries, how can you minimize that interpretation that people bring to the table? So is it a yes or no type of data point that is being set? So for example, the common thing that we come across is like, let's just take, for example, the opportunity stages of the forecasting funnel. And we see a lot of companies set needs analysis. Needs analysis, what? Is it completed? Is it booked? Having that clarity provides team with more clarity and leaving no room for interpretation. So if something is entered incorrectly, everyone is on the same page on that is actually a mistake that was entered incorrectly. So creating that clarity with the data points that we're asking people to enter. And lastly, one of the most important things here is creating focus. So when we say focus is, again, this kind of goes back to some of my real life examples. Early on in my career, I have been just like a squirrel goes around collecting nuts. I've been a data squirrel running around collecting data. And, we've spent massive amounts of effort in creating visibility, but then that some of the data points that we worked in creating massive visibility was not part of the critical path. So defining the critical path and creating that focus to say, this is really critical data for the business, enables teams that are using the system, enables teams that are measuring the system to create clean data at the end of the day. Again, foolproof data it's a concept, and it is very important. In one of the slides Jen talked about, there's 99.5% of the data goes unused. This will significantly help to move away from that problem when we kind of start leveraging automation, creating focus, and really removing as much room as possible for people to make those interpretations within the data. And so how do we actually connect all these dots from, you know, understanding the system logic to mapping it to, and understanding the system logic for one system is one thing versus understanding it in an ecosystem. And this is a common gap that we see. And we've worked with companies from, you know, in the 5 million range to the $1 billion range. And this is, again, a common problem or common theme that has emerged, that there's no one function that can look cross-functionally and are solving a data problem. Marketing is solving a data problem for marketing. Sales is solving a data problem for sales. And again, same goes for customer success and delivery teams. Everyone is solving their data problems. And what is missing is that connected look for the C-level at the end of the day. And it is the closest, again, to the C-level is either the customer success or the sales teams. So that, again, creating that deceptive data on what is really happening. And, you know, one of, before I dive into here's the path to leverage it, one client example that we've come across is we've had a client who was doing an amazing job with their sales team, but they were also investing a lot of money in building their marketing function. And the marketing function was getting built, which is amazing, and was actually starting to generate qualified leads. But there was a breakdown in this connected structure, and someone, you know, looking cross-functionally was lacking. So what happened, the quality of the leads were amazing. Marketing team was doing an amazing job generating really high quality leads, but the sales team was going out and continuing to buy cold leads to call without realizing there is a massive amount of warm qualified leads in their own sales funnel. And that was 2 million worth that could have been in sales, right? So again, this connected system, this cross-functional view, it's the key to unlocking, one of the keys to unlocking growth data. And this is the visual here is how we leverage growth data. And one of the first things is customer lifecycle definition. Again, what we're doing here is, we talked about focus and how do we create focus. It's creating clarity. This is how life cycle stages are defined, be it the marketing life cycle stages, be it the opportunity stages, be it the delivery funnel. And, you know, some companies actually end up having to go through 3 different funnels before they can see revenue at the end of their business process. But really clearly identifying what those triggers are, what moves it to the next stage, gives that clear visibility and forecasting capability. And then the second thing is handoff, sales and marketing handoff, and, you know, even from sales to delivery handoff. One of the key things is, you know, how is this baton reliably passed between the teams, right? And the example that I shared was the baton was kind of getting dropped between marketing and sales. And again, it can happen between sales to delivery as well. So leveraging automation to facilitate these handoff points as clearly, as effectively as possible really helps. And again, you know, this is also one of the key places where if it is mapped and there's a lot of thinking before the system is, you know, set to action, sales intelligence can be passed off in a timely manner. Nurture strategies can be set very effectively. And the very last pillar, and again, a lot of companies start with the dashboards thinking that, oh, okay, I'm just lacking a dashboard, I just need it to be visual, without working on the first 2, which is really creating the focus, automating, creating the clear data points, and then getting into the dashboards to say, here's my growth GPS, here's where I am at in terms of where my revenue goal is, how far have I come, what do I need? Do I need to add a team member, or do I need to, you know, do I have the right team in place to get us to where we need to go in terms of growth goals? It may be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but having that growth GPS, again, it's kind of, you know, in this day and age, you're driving somewhere, but you're basically relying on, oh, how far have I come? So maybe I might be here, is what a lot of businesses are doing. This visibility helps businesses to really bring that growth data and visualize it, and helps them to move forward. And the very last part here is the master data management and automation. This is really the nuts and bolts, and we went really dive deep into all the different technologies and the ecosystems and how it all needs to be connected. This is where that, you know, that cross-functional data perspective needs to happen to bring it all together. And this is exactly how we end up getting into it and really leveraging that growth data. And again, growth data is unique for every business. So for a company that's in recruiting, where the revenue comes after a candidate is placed, versus a company that is selling products, versus a company that is selling services, it could be very different how the growth data plays out. It is all a matter of really being able to map it out, defining it, automating it, and then connecting the dots. So having said that, what are some of the practical strategies that we can leave you guys today with? If my computer would cooperate. So here are some of the practical strategies. The first and foremost is having a cross-functional view across all the functions where revenue is, you know, it's moving. It starts from marketing and it continues to move throughout the different ecosystem and the different functions. And having a connected system can really stress enough the importance of having a connected system. In one situation where we went into, this is a really massive company, and they have really big marketing teams, really big sales teams, but at the end of the day, their marketing system and sales systems weren't connected, creating, you know, massive lack of visibility. And lastly, eliminating manual process as much as possible. If your sales team is actually going and entering their activity data, you know, and in some cases, the activity data in terms of emails have been automated, but how many of us here do businesses just via emails? We use text, we use phones, we're booking meetings and taking our meetings on Zoom, and this is all part of the sales call. So if you are only tracking email, you're falling into the deceptive data trap. And if you're relying on people to enter the rest of the activity, how much of it is actually automated in terms of tracking? And lastly, agreement and communication between the teams. We all live in a very connected world, but we're also living in a world where there's too much information, too many technologies. So, you know, having clarity in what something means, even if it's as simple as marketing qualified lead, we have come into situations where it means very different for different organizations. Having that clarity, and at what point does it go into sales, at what point does it go into delivery, and having that clarity and having that collected agreement is key. And lastly, leveraging automation. So here, you know, one of our core beliefs is automation creates clean data, and clean data is required to deliver on the automation promise. So really being able to strike that balance, we hope you're also going to be able to close some of those gaps. Thank you.
So for those of you out there who think you may be facing a data challenge, and that data challenge may be holding you back, what we'd like to do is offer a strategy session. So we have a few strategy sessions available. So if you're interested in talking to Alice and I about where data may be trapped in your business and talking about some short-term and long-term strategies that you could apply, feel free to reach out, Jennifer@digitalmagenta.com, and we'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll book that session. So I would like to thank everybody for listening in today.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Jen.